This video is sponsored by me. That's right. The weekend retreat is happening again this year from the 11th to the 13th of July. And you don't want to miss it because this year we're studying Ecclesiastes. That's right. The book that I haven't been able to stop talking about or thinking about for the last 5 years. We're putting aside a whole weekend to look at it. So email lambda.retreats@gmail.com if you're interested. It's from the 11th to the 13th of July. Whether you're a deeply committed Christian and you have been for years and you want a based environment to have those honest conversations, or maybe you're an atheist, but there's been some part of you been saying, I should give God a chance, or perhaps you're just feeling lonely and isolated in the modern world. Either way, email lambda.retreats@gmail.com and come and join us. Well, I've invited some of the sharpest minds on the internet to compete in a competition of intellect, cunning, and taste. Welcome, Philisophicat. I'm throwing down the gauntlet. Do you accept the challenge?
I'm ready to run the gauntlet. Let's do this.
Well, as you can see, this year I've massively overcomplicated the format. The idea is you travel outwards. You're this knight here. So you go outwards from Lambda's Landing. You face various foes. The further that you travel, the more lucrative it becomes, the more gold you can get. And the gold goes into your pouch. And then you have to return to Lambda's Landing to put it from your pouch into the treasury. And your final score at the end of the session is however much gold is in your treasury. Make sense so far?
Sounds very mercantile, but I believe I can do it.
I should give credit, by the way, to Poe. Do you know Poe the person? She's drawn all of this artwork for me. So
cool.
She's done an excellent job. And I take every opportunity to shout that out. So your first decision is which direction you'd like to go. You can go either to the Dunes of Dishonesty, the Biased Bridge, the East Crossroads, or the Standing Stones. Now, depending on which way you go, it relates to which topic we're going to discuss. So, or at least discuss initially, because you'll probably come back to the landing and then go a different direction. So essentially, this is the choice between culture, society, knowledge, and ethics.
Oh, dear. I remember doing this last year, and I always felt like I couldn't choose.
Yes. As I say, you could probably go one way now and then try a different path. I think some people have managed to go down all four paths here. So,
okay, let's go to the East Crossroads, just because there's a horse there, and I like horses.
That is as good a reason as any. Okay, so you set out along the path, but bad news. Into your pathway leaps a savage shifter. Bones crack and reform as the human before you transforms under moonlight, twisting into a savage werewolf with jaws that can crush steel. So you've hit your first opponent and you're going to get a bout of questions here. This path relates to knowledge. So it's actually a mini quiz. So
oh no, a test first thing on a Monday morning.
I know. Welcome to the week. So don't take this too seriously, but it's just rapid fire, quick questions. So are you ready to face the savage shifter?
I guess so. I have to do it.
You have no choice at this point. Okay, first question is, who painted Starry Night? I know it looks like it's multiple choice here, but that's just a bug.
Vincent Van Gogh.
Correct.
Yay,
well done.
I got one.
Okay, question 2. What is the largest ocean on Earth?
Pacific.
Correct. Okay.
Oh, I love trivia.
Yeah, yes.
Just don't give me any sports questions.
I'm so tempted to dig out a sports one right now. Let's pick a slightly harder one. what is the only planet in our solar system that rotates clockwise?
I believe that's Venus. I should
Shall I build up
probably
some
know
suspense?
this.
You're correct. 3 out of 3. Okay. So what happens now is that I've put in your scores here on the back end, and it will then roll some dice and decide whether or not you've defeated this foe. So
Double sixes, double sixes.
here we go. Oh, it's a strong monster. You could be in trouble here.
Oh no.
Oh, victory. Okay,
Woohoo!
Success. Well done. So we'll go back to the map. That means that you can progress. So you will, I think, now be able to get as far as the East Crossroads, which gives you a new set of options, which is you could head back to where you came from, Lambda's Landing, to bank your 21 gold that's in your pouch currently, or you could carry on forwards, and you could either go to, yes, Superstition Swamp or Chicanery Shack.
Okay, so if I just carry my gold around with me, is there a chance at some point that I could lose it?
That's right. If you die to any of the monsters, that gold that was in your pouch will go to 0, and you go back to Lambda's Landing, having lost it all. But if you go back to Lambda's Landing, then you have to answer new questions on the way out. And the amount of gold that you get from each encounter goes up more and more the further out you go. So it's kind of push your luck mechanic.
Am I feeling lucky today?
Yeah.
You know what? Rarely do I feel lucky, but I'm going to push my luck anyway.
Okay.
Let's head over to the swamp there. That doesn't look
Superstition Swamp. So that's questions related to the natural world. Probably not quiz questions, though.
Okay. I like superstitions. Or suppositions. Which is it? I don't even have my glasses. I can't even read it.
Oh, okay. So you're on your way, but here comes Vitala, a shroud-wrapped figure emerging from a grave. And the question that Vitala presents is: does understanding nature diminish its wonder? Now, this isn't a yes or no. This isn't a quiz question. This is a topic for discussion. So give me your thoughts on this question, and I've got various things to score you on here.
I feel like the more I learn about nature, the more its wonder increases. That there is, the deeper you dig into it, the more you get into the mechanics, the underlying metaphysics of it all, the quantum physics. It gets weirder and weirder the deeper you go. And I don't know how anybody could not be amazed by that. Whereas if I just kind of look at it in a very material sense, I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, that's a nice tree. It's a nice flower. It's a nice beach. But it ends there. So for me, I say, no, it does not diminish its wonder.
What about the nastier side of nature? Is there a diminishment to the wonder of nature when you realize that it's so full of pain and suffering?
No, I just see that as kind of an alternate force to two complementary forces that are both still part of the fundamental nature of God. Just because we subjectively experience it as unpleasant doesn't mean that it is, qualitatively evil in that sense. It's a hindrance to maybe what we want to do as human beings, but it has its role to play. And I actually think that duality makes nature even more interesting.
I do agree. And I especially find that true at the extremes of scale. If you look in a microscope and you see how individual cells work, that the machinery inside every cell of the body is like the most complicated factory that we could build. It's like it blows anything that we do as humans out of the water, the amount that's going on, and that's in one cell. And then at the other extreme, you look into space, and with your naked eye, you can kind of see something that looks a bit cool. When you actually see it through the Hubble Space Telescope, it's like you can't believe what's out there. Is this stuff at a colossal scale, and yet it's beautiful in its own way.
Yeah, and the more macro you go, the crazier it all gets.
Right. You kind of wonder if you could go even smaller than we have machinery to look. Does the wonder go up even more if you could see even further out into the distant universe beyond what we can observe? Is there even bigger stuff than we've ever imagined?
Like, just all the laws of physics just start to get a bit warped. But interestingly, it's the same at the like ultra tiny microcosmic level too. It starts to get really funky.
Yeah, everything gets more interesting. It would be weird if we happened to exist in the interesting part of the spectrum, and the bit beyond what we can see just happens to stop being interesting. Surely there are further mysteries, like further amazing things that we've got no way to, I think about people millennia ago, and there were still supernova out there in, off outside of their knowledge, but they still existed, right? There was still microscopic organisms even thousands of years ago, and people just had no idea that all this amazing stuff was going on. So I kind of think, wow, there must be equivalently awesome stuff going on right now that we have no access to. And hopefully, as our ability to probe the universe continues to expand, we will continue to make these mind-blowing discoveries.
Yeah, I just want to know it all.
Yeah, it's just a greedy, but maybe there's more than you could possibly know. Maybe your brain would be filled up to absolute saturation with mind-blowing stuff, and you'd be like, I've barely scratched the surface.
Yeah, like there's kind of a point on either end of the extreme where it becomes very difficult for us to even push past that, just because the laws of the material world that we exist in kind of start to get warped at those extreme edges. Like, it's very difficult to, observe a particle, for example, but equally we can't really observe beyond the expansion of space either. And I'm kind of like, all right, why are we not able to see that? What are they hiding back there?
Yeah. On the other hand, I sometimes think about, you could be teleported to anywhere in the universe, and it would be a pretty miserable existence. We just happen to be located in this tiny, thin shell of habitable life where there's all this culture and biological, communication and entertainment and, meaning. What a crazy piece of luck that it was one of the things if I'm ever feeling down, I can pick myself up with that, being like, it could be worse. You could be in any of the other 99.9999% of space that we know about, and life would be a lot worse.
Well, most of space is completely empty.
Yeah.
Like, if you zoom way out and you like the clusters of galaxies and stuff, they basically form like little neural networks through space, and the rest of it's just completely empty.
Yeah. And most of space is empty on a microscopic scale as well. If you zoom in to what looks like solid matter, a good chunk of granite, inside of it is mostly empty space with the odd electron, and then vast gulf of nothing, and then a tiny little proton.
Which is so weird when you think about it.
It's mind-bending. Good. Okay. Well, let's call it into that discussion and do battle with Vitala. How are you feeling? Confident?
I don't know.
It's doing lots of calculations here. Success.
Yay!
Good. Right. We can continue. So 2 monsters down. So far your journey into the Gauntlet 2025 has been pretty successful, and you've reached your next point, the supposition swamp. So once again, you can turn back and bank your 70 gold, or you could push forwards to the wood or the roost, which relate to biology or physics.
Well, I better go to the red pill roost because I don't actually know that much about physics.
Okay.
Like,
let's see.
I like it as an amateur, but I'm not, I don't have enough of a math brain to ever really get deeply into physics, unfortunately, to my great regret.
Okay. So you're traveling towards Red Pill Roost, but once again, disaster strikes and a lancer comes out into the path, an ancient warrior ready to give you another challenge. And the lancer asks, is it good to edit genes?
That's something I have kind of mixed thoughts about. I'm not opposed to eugenics, and I assume that that's kind of what is being referenced here in this question. Like,
well, not necessarily. I'd include both, kind of guiding the gene pool through directed evolution, but also I'm also interested in your thoughts in more direct gene editing. So using CRISPR to
to make sure you don't have a kid with a genetic disorder or something.
Yeah, or in the natural world to like take a crop and say we're going to edit it so it doesn't get this disease, or edit a mosquito so that it doesn't pass on diseases to us, things like this.
In principle, I don't have a problem with it. I don't think that it's like inherently good or bad. It's just a tool that we can use to manipulate our material existence. But where I kind of start to have a problem with it is the fact that it's obviously very open to misuse. And, on its own, fine. But in the context of it being placed in human hands and knowing what human nature is like, I feel like the possibility for it to be misused is too high for my comfort level. At the same time, it's kind of like, well, if you have a baby with a genetic disorder, why wouldn't you want to fix it for that child and give them the best chance to fulfill their potential and to be able to live a life that is spiritually fulfilling as well? I mean, a lot of these disorders don't allow for a person to do that because they're too disabled. So I'm kind of, on an individual scale, I would have a lot of sympathy for, parents put in that position. On a societal scale, I just feel like it would just end up being used to, breed people who are more easy for the establishment to manipulate and use for their own ends, and, or potentially leading to some kind of Gattaca-like scenario where if you don't edit your kids' genes, then they're not going to be able to keep up with society. And I mean, there is something about it that kind of just doesn't pass the tradition test for me, in the sense that our genes are passed down to us from our ancestors, and that connection to the blood and that gene is like, the force that resides in the blood is not the blood itself, but it is kind of carried atavistically through that. And when you start messing with that, how much are you messing with like that totem, that collective soul of your stock? And for similar reasons, the mixing of the races raises similar concerns for me. We just don't understand what the effect of that is on a deeper force. Sorry for my phone dinging like that. I'll just put it on Do Not Disturb. So, yeah, I mean, it's really hard for me to pick like a really rigid and dogmatic position on this, because there's so many things to consider. And I feel like if it was just done on a small scale for just a few exceptional cases where there's genuinely something wrong, that's very different than mass eugenicizing the whole population. So
I don't need a strong stance one way or the other, unlike last year. This year, I'm just interested in. I like a nuanced take on the subject of eugenics. It's sometimes occurred to me that the kind of God-given eugenic force is women selecting mates, and that's the kind of cadence and strength that we should be able to kind of pin down our genes, and to in either direction, if you are doing more or less human level selection, you're running into danger.
Yes. And I mean, like, I think to myself, like, would I want to edit any of my genes? Well, I mean, of course, we all have things about ourselves that we wish were different or could improve upon or something. But at the same time, the challenges that come with that are part of the life that I'm here to live, the path that God's laid down for me. And there is value in suffering. It does have a purifying aspect to it, or it can, if you approach it with the correct mindset. And I don't know that it is spiritually beneficial for our souls to seek to artificially avoid that. I think ultimately it just makes us weaker and less resilient people. Even while it's making us physically stronger, it's making us psychologically and spiritually weaker. So, I mean, I don't love having, like, say, my health problems or something. If I could push a button to get rid of it, it'd be very tempting to do that. And I might push the button. But at the same time, I also recognize that, this is my karma that I'm meant to work through and I need to come to terms with that. And I need to put in the work to do that. And if I don't do that, what repercussions does that have on my soul? So I probably lean a bit more towards I'm more against it than I am.
You're hesitant.
For it. Yeah. Like a 60-40 kind of.
I think there's a sense in which I look at 2020 a bit like Jurassic Park, right? The scientists were playing with something that they shouldn't have been, and kind of suffered the consequences. Like well, I mean, it's a little bit of a complicated argument, because also I think, had we not locked the world down, I don't think anybody really would have noticed COVID as being a particularly bad.
Nobody would have noticed
thing. No, so I guess my argument on the one hand is probably a load of people did die from COVID because it was the result of meddling in a lab. But on the other hand, it wasn't actually that many people. It was like a little, compared to seasonal winter flus or whatever, it's kind of like maybe a small bump.
Yeah.
But it does say, I think it's like a little warning sign to me of, well, it's potentially possible that you could create something in the lab that really could wipe out like vast amounts of the human population. It could happen, I think. And that's the risk that you take.
That's one of those things where I'm kind of like, in the wrong hands. And we have a lot of wrong hands in the world.
Yeah. I think so I remember reading about this. I don't think it's, I can't remember what stage it got to in terms of approvals, but there's a little mutation that they could do to, it's something like mosquitoes, where you can make this entire population die out within a couple of generations, because it gets spread around and then it gets triggered, and then the whole population, it would spread almost unstoppably, and then they all die, kind of like the nightmare scenario. And I figure if they're confident that they can do it to insects, surely they could do it to humans as well.
Yeah. Like, I feel like if we get too far down gene editing territory, it's just going to be turned into bioweapons.
Yeah.
I just feel like we'd use it as a tool of our own self-destruction at some point. And any good that was done by it on an individual level would be greatly undone on a societal level. That said, I am in favor of gene editing mosquitoes. It is, I'm all for bioweapons in the mosquito holy war. So they are.
But the people researching the anti-mosquito gene editing are unlocking a technology that other people that will want to use on humans. So
yes, there is
know.
that problem.
But then the other argument is that technology is an unstoppable force, and you can't prevent technologies from being researched. The best you can do is use, good technology to fight bad technology, and you just always have to be one step ahead of those with malicious intent. Like, could we have really prevented, I don't know, what's an obviously bad technology? Well, you could probably make the argument most technology has been bad.
Evelyn and Gwinon certainly would.
Yeah.
That said, they still printed their books on printing presses. So.
Well, exactly. There you go. So even the most techno-pessimistic embrace. I once had an email exchange with Richard Stallman. He's a bit of a rock star amongst programmers. But he's got very strong views about, well, he's part of the free software movement. So his big thing is that all the companies with proprietary technology, like Apple would be a classic example, they lock everything down. He thinks that is evil. And I once was asking him about, should we use YouTube as a method of getting his message out there? And he said yes. I was surprised. He agreed to have his talks being shared on YouTube, because he kind of acknowledged that even though he thought YouTube was evil, it was introducing people to his ideas, and some of them were being convinced. So
sometimes you just have to use what's available.
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Good. Okay, let's do battle against the Lancer. I think you've put in a good shift there. Lancer's not
He's
not ended
weak
up with very good stats. I think there you go.
Slain.
Okay, great. So you've reached the end of the path. So you now probably want to head back to Lambda Landing and
yes, let's head back that way into the bank.
Good idea. Okay, so let's sorry, I've just got some buttons to press here on the back end. There we go, back to where you started. And I'll click bank. So your money is in the treasury. That's now safe. You've got a minimum of 150 gold. So do you want to head out the same direction again, back towards the Genes of Dishonesty? No, back towards the crossroads? Or would you like to go towards the Biased Bridge? Or
let's go the other way.
Or Standing Stones?
Let's go to the... Oh, okay. I do actually have a few options here.
You've got 4 different ways to go to begin with.
All right. Let's do the Dunes of Dishonesty.
Sure.
Maybe we'll find a liar along the way to slay.
Yes. All right. Here we go. So get him to start moving towards the dunes. Uh-oh. Leviathan.
Well, this looks terrible.
The massive serpent's coils
Good thing we went to the
scrape against... Yeah, I think you got lucky there. It unwinds its incredible length, scales gleaming like wet metal in the half-life. The half-light. Now, okay, here is a topic that I'm sure you have thoughts on. Do cultures degrade over time?
Yes.
All right, discussion over.
This is just a given.
Well, no. If cultures are always degrading, throughout all of time? Does that mean if you just go back, if you got in a time machine, the further back you went, just the better things would become? You're sort of an anti-progressive in that sense. That
well, no, because you will come up against cultures that are in various stages of degradation. They're not all on the same timeline. Some of them, you'd find some of them in their infancy and some of them in their twilight. But as a general principle, like this kind of bumps up against the modern narrative of progressivism, that everything is always on the upward trend, everything is always getting better. Humans are, always progressing towards some apex, and that, the further away you are from the original primordial point, the better and more superior you are. And it's just, that does not pass the tradition test. Everything in nature, everything in materiality is subject to the law of entropy. Humans are not an exception to this, and the things that we produce, such as our cultures, are not an exception to this. So this kind of goes into the traditional concept of involution, right? We're not evolving into more advanced species, but neither are we. Like, devolution kind of implies that we came from a primitive way of being, we got better, and now we're going back to that primitive way. No, like, involution is like, we start out at the top as like whatever semi-divine beings or whatever, however you want to conceptualize it, like that apex. And over time, that will gradually degrade, because there is nothing in this material world that can have any permanence. So whether or not you have some like fluctuations in that culture where they have like little mini kind of like golden periods and renaissances and things like that, the general trajectory is always kind of a downward trend over time. And eventually every culture fades away, every race fades away.
So then the obvious question is, how do cultures get their initial high point? Like, what's the source of the high point that then degrades?
I would say it's usually going to be the spiritual chrism of that culture. What was the animating force that was driving it? So, for example, the founding of Rome, probably these Aryan steppe warriors coming in with their sun cult and their warrior ethos, they built Rome up to be something that we still talk about thousands of years later, and that people are still fascinated with it. Like, why do all men think about ancient Rome, right?
Yes.
And it's because there's something about the animating spirit that allowed it to become so great that it still looms large in our imaginations. But when that original stock begins to die off and degrade, you're going to get a complementary degradation of culture going with it.
But if you were to go just prior to that point of the foundation of Rome, how come those people had that spirit? Was that just a divine blessing that came one day out of the blue, or like if those people had? Because if you trace back through time, surely from the moment that they had that animating spirit, they were gonna found this massive civilization pretty quickly. So there must have been a time during history at which that struck them, no?
Well, not a lot is known about like who actually founded Rome. Like, there were people living on the Italian peninsula, but they were not Aryan peoples with Aryan cultures. Those who swooped in and founded Rome, I mean, they basically just kind of tore through the whole Eurasian continent, setting up their little Aryan cultures everywhere. And this is kind of, where we look to when we're talking about like the Hyperborean tradition. So, I'm not an anthropologist. I have not studied like all the genetic flow and everything like some people like Arvel and Survive the Jive have. So I recommend anybody go look there for that. But, just kind of based on this theory of the migration out of Hyperborea after the cataclysm, or the migrations out of Atlantis, for example, of the second cataclysm. You're basically dealing with a people that I think are carrying a primordial tradition from the north, and why they decided to settle and establish civilizations in a given place and time. I mean, we can only speculate.
Does that then imply there's a continuity? So you have a high civilization on the planet that moves around, like the strong tradition relocates, but it.
Evola refers to these as civilizational peaks. So if you think of like really high mountains where the peaks are like sticking up above the tops of the clouds, they can all see each other from the peaks, but they're different mountains. However, they all have the same view of the sky. They all connect with each other. They're above the clouds. Think of the clouds as kind of like that dividing line that divides the realm of becoming from the realm of being. There's something about these cultures that has a transcendent connection. But when that transcendent connection is lost because, they're failing to maintain the rights, or they're diluting their blood, or, whatever the case may be, maybe they've been conquered or something. There's all kinds of things that could happen. But as they move further away from that origin point, that original connection to transcendence, and then they fail to maintain that connection, that will necessarily cause their culture and people to degrade. And that's why we have crappy cultures today, because there's no transcendent connection in any of them.
But there may again be a new mountain peak, as it were. It could be that if we were to fast forward 300 years, we would say, oh, look, there's another new culture that is in a mode of flourishing that will degrade, but it's emerged.
I think, I don't think we're quite so far into the Kali Yuga that a civilization like that couldn't emerge. It's probably pretty unlikely that would happen at this stage, but maybe it arises at some point. Probably not in our lifetimes, though. I don't think it would essentially require like a new founding myth that is handed down directly from the gods, or through some revealed kind of message through a prophet, right? That's how religions get established. That's how that initial connection with the transcendent occurs. It's either traced directly back to something that the gods taught to humans, or to some prophet who is a messenger of the gods. So,
am I right that sorry, carry on.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is the Kali Yuga also part of a cyclical theory of history? So there has been a previous Kali Yuga, and there will be again in the future, a sort of endless cycle. Yeah,
the Kali Yuga is necessary to seed the next golden age. So even though it sucks for us, once again, like just because something's subjectively unpleasant for us doesn't mean that it's objectively bad in a qualitative sense. That cycle, that dissolution, is what creates the fertile ground for something new to sprout, for the next golden age to sprout. So we're
talking thousands of years, right?
It's a long time scale. I don't personally subscribe to the idea that the Kali Yuga is going to be over anytime soon, or that it has already ended. Because if that were the case, we would see a much stronger and more widespread transcendent connection throughout society. And instead, we're seeing the opposite. We're continuing to move further and further away from that. So, leveraging it against the tradition test doesn't pass that idea.
Brilliant. Okay. I think it's time to fight Leviathan here.
He looks pretty strong.
But I think you are looking pretty strong too. So there we go. Victory. Whew. All right.
Hate snakes.
Good. So feels like hating snakes is actually the healthy way to feel as a human.
Yeah, there's just something about them that's just no thank you. Don't want to mess with you. Fortunately, cats are very good at killing them.
Do you have cats?
Too many.
All right, so you've got two choices here. Do you want to go to the Benevolence Bay for questions around expression, or the West Crossroads for questions around storytelling?
Let's go to the West Crossroads.
Nice. All right. You set out towards the West Crossroads. But alas, into your path.
So many monsters in this land. Somebody should do something about this.
Yeah, well, I feel like the Gauntlet lore is somehow that this island has been set up to test knights, to test warriors. So they've kind of packed it full of they've taken all of the ghouls and monsters that they've found around the world and put them all here to test their strongest warriors.
I've been working out, so hopefully I'm strong enough.
This is your moment of testing. I wonder all of the symbolic layers in what I've created here. There is something cyclical about the fact that you keep coming back to the starting point and you return with hopefully with new gold that you've acquired. All right. So the question relating to storytelling is, are universal narrative patterns evidence of shared human experience? I guess what I have in mind here is you seem to be able to go around the world and see similarities between the stories that people tell. Does that spring from a deeper kind of human spiritual battle that we all go through? Is that the source of this?
Do you mean like how many different cultures have like flood myths?
Yeah, exactly. This kind of mythical, the fables that we see around the world. Some would argue, and you could disagree with the premise, but certainly lots of people have said, "Oh, look how the stories that people tell from disconnected bits of the planet have all these things in common with each other." Why is that?
My answer would be that it comes from a shared primordial spiritual tradition, because these myths are usually they're not like stories in the profane sense of, oh, we're just telling a story about a flood that actually happened. I mean, maybe the flood actually happened, but that's not really the point of the story. Its real value is in its mythical content and what that has to tell us about something that is true about the metaphysical world or about the spiritual path that we are meant to be walking. So I think when you are finding these kinds of similar myths across the world, you're kind of finding a connection point between two cultures that, either at one time shared in a primordial spiritual tradition, or have found their own way to that same framework, I guess you could say, that same spiritual framework, and have conceptualized it in a similar manner. Because a lot of the stuff in those myths is highly symbolic, and a true symbol connects multiple layers of reality together. It can be interpreted on many, many different levels. Like, it's not a symbol like the Statue of Liberty is a symbol. The Statue of Liberty just kind of means one thing, and it means a thing that is, a very banal interpretation of it. Whereas a true symbol will connect through like multiple different layers of meaning and tie all those things together into one coherent principle. So I think when you're dealing with these shared narrative patterns, that's kind of what you're dealing with. So I don't necessarily think that, I mean, maybe like, to use our flood analogy, maybe the flood really did happen. Or maybe all these cultures just experienced different floods at different times and came up with similar stories about it. But the symbolic interpretation of that is the rising of the waters, the rising of the realm of becoming, the rising of that yin energy that pulls us away from God. And where does Noah end up? On a mountain peak. What's a mountain peak symbolic of? It's symbolic of the center. It's symbolic of having returned to being and taken haven from the rising of the waters, from the realm of becoming, finding that sanctuary in the divine.
Yeah, it seems to me there's a deep connection between the flood stories and a contemplation of death, that it's connected to the fact that we're all facing this process that we sort of sense is approaching, that our own death. I guess in the modern world, we are as disconnected from death as anybody ever has been. But to one degree or another, we all know that there is this kind of great mysterious journey to go on, and that I suppose we somehow intuit that we need some manner of safe passage through an unknown future catastrophe that's kind of unavoidable. Like there's nothing that anybody could have done to prevent the flood itself from happening, but for our protagonists who survive the flood, then they're kind of given this protective bubble around them that, if the flood destroys the whole world and reforms the whole landscape, and you find yourself in a whole new reality. I don't know. It seems. It reminds me of. I think a lot of cultures have their various concepts of what happens to the human soul after death. But a lot of them do seem to have this element of sort of some make it and some don't, whether it's like the weighing scales in Egyptian mythology, like you have to be the right side of the scales to make it through, or the idea of St. Paul, which I think is a sort of kind of medieval Christian idea, actually, that you kind of arrive at the pearly gates, and he's going to decide whether you're in or not, and that feels like what the story of the flood in some ways is about. Most fundamentally, is this kind of divine judgment relating to this kind of threat that everybody faces, and then just the small number of people who are preserved through it. I think in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which the flood narrative is just a sort of side quest, it's a little small thing that happens. Gilgamesh is looking for eternal life, and he goes and finds Noah, and Noah tells him the story of the flood that happened, but basically says, because I made it through the flood, I've got eternal life, but that's no use to you because it was a one-time thing. And Gilgamesh leaves a bit grumpy because he's like, oh, great, I was hoping that this would be the answer to my quest, but I guess this is no help to me.
Yeah, they all seem to have, like, all of these narratives that you find around the world all do link into something spiritual. They're not just stories. And I think if we were talking about just stories, I can't think of any that we find as universally as some of these spiritual myths.
In a way, the idea that a story is for the purposes of entertainment, it's like, let's keep the kids busy for half an hour, that's a very weak and insipid use of time. It's like biding your life by, just kind of making it through the day. Surely the real purpose of story, and the reason that we're so drawn to them, is because it's more than just a way to it's more than just a way to pass time. That stories are so significant. They feel like we somehow intuit that stories are more important than the actual things that happen to us. Like we are connecting through stories into a greater reality, and we get so swept up in a story because it actually is meaningful.
Well, and that's the stories that have the most staying power are the ones that can link into that. Like, that's why Lord of the Rings is so popular. It contains a lot of those elements of traditional myth and actually does speak to some certain transcendent truths within it. Harry Potter will not be popular in 1,000 years, but Lord of the Rings might still be. Like, I could see Lord of the Rings kind of being like this era's Grail legends were in the Middle Ages, right?
Right.
And you don't really realize that until you've got a couple hundred years of perspective on it. Mm-hmm. But, I think that's why it looms so large in people's minds.
It's funny because, I mean, Tolkien, I guess, was writing something that felt like it was from a previous era in the era that he was writing. So it was kind of self-consciously mythic, right? That he was taking elements that he discovered from folklore and turning it into a new folklore. But perhaps that's always the way it has been. I suppose stories that I even think of Star Wars, right? It starts, and George Lucas was very interested in folklore traditions around the world, and again explicitly put elements of it into what he was making, and he chose to start his futuristic sci-fi movie with a long time ago. So there's like, even if you're making a thing that has the aesthetic quality of being in the future, he still felt that it was more appropriate to tell his audience that it had happened a long time in the past. And there must be a connection there between something that was in the distant past and something that is kind of symbolic and deep and mythological. Or like, do you know Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe? C.S. Lewis. There's that idea of the magic from long eras past that kind of means that Aslan doesn't end up dying. Do you know what I mean? That the deep past is somehow very meaningful to us. We don't. We shouldn't look down on it.
I think there is something that draws us toward the primordial. It's the point of origin. It's the point at which we were closest to the divine. Mm-hmm. So it makes sense on a higher level as to why we would be drawn towards those kind of things. I think when I think of the people who have no interest in the past and are only focused on like some techno futuristic society that they want to build, like all these people who are focused on the present and the future are almost always atheists, total materialists, no spiritual chrism whatsoever.
She was just like a very sad mindset to have. I guess I find it difficult to properly engage with, because I think I've believed in God for, well, at least as long as I can remember. So I haven't got that kind of atheist phase to connect with. So I find it quite mysterious to imagine. Like it feels to me like it would be hopelessly bleak to be an atheist.
I did have an atheist phase. So like I was raised, really strict Catholic, had my atheist phase, and then kind of came back to spirituality later. And, I was in the atheist phase for, at least a good 10 years. I'd have to think about exact dates or something, but minimum 10 years. So a long enough time to fully explore it. And I remember when I first got into it feeling like, oh, this is something that's offering me truth and knowledge that I wasn't getting from the Catholic tradition. And you can gorge yourself on that for a while. And then one of two things happens. Either you make material knowledge into a religion called scientism, or you find your way back to spirituality. And I think for a lot of these atheists and stuff, they're just kind of stuck in the religion of the science and the worship of man's material knowledge, the worship of their own cognitive minds. And it is kind of sad. A lot of them end up being very nihilistic because it's very hard to pin meaning to anything that is purely physical. There's not really anything that's going to give you a sense of like purpose larger than your own life. And a lot of them become very like progressive humanitarians and stuff. And I think that's why I think they're looking for that broader purpose for their life to fit into. And in the absence of spirituality, I do think that they tend to kind of be like, oh, well, I'll just fix the world and end human suffering through my utopian visions, which always ends up increasing human suffering. And that becomes the only good that they can conceive of. Suffering bad, not suffering good. And they end up with this very kind of black and white thinking. And so you're either going to burn yourself out on that or you're not. And so I do get where they're coming from, but I don't get the desire to stay there and make it into a religion. That's just a little weird to me. Because when I hit that point, I was just like, this is where I'm not getting any more answers. Like I either have to like go this route into lies of a false materialist religion, or I have to go this other way and find a new way of finding answers. So I think a lot of it kind of comes down to how much people care about the truth.
There's this fascinating Psalm 14 that says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. So it's not that there were no atheists before, the 20th century, or the 12th century or whatever. But they are kind of engaged with and grappled with in the Psalms. I'm sure you could find similar things in other religious traditions as well. It says, the fool says in his heart, there is no God. They are corrupt. Their deeds are vile. There is no one who does good. So there the claim is being made that, I guess, the reason that somebody might choose not to believe in God is because their conscience is against them. They know there's no excuse for what they're doing, and but actually, if there's no ultimate morality, they can get away with it. So, do you think part of the appeal to atheism is as a license for not being tied down? I think a lot of people view religion as chains, like people who are religious.
Yes,
are like
they
bound
view
up.
it as they tend to view it as something that chains them and enslaves them, rather than seeing it as a scaffolding that supports them. And it's interesting that Psalm talking about the fool says in his heart, because the heart is the center of consciousness. And when you, like all the great, spiritually advanced people have all kind of gone inward and they find God in their hearts. But in finding God in their heart, they also come to know themselves. And so it's really interesting to kind of think about it from that perspective. If the atheist says in his heart that there is no God, it's almost kind of a form of self-denial in a way, or at least a denial of their higher self. And so if you're going to deny your higher self, then what purpose does religion serve you? You would see it as only preventing you from seeking pleasure, because now your material comfort is the only thing that you're pursuing. How can I get more of this wonderful good thing, and how can I keep it and make it last? And it becomes like, it's no wonder that they end up with a lot of vices, for example, because what they see as enslaving them, the religion, and they cast that off. They don't realize that they are actually choosing much tighter chains and becoming slaves to their own lower selves.
I think that's one of the most interesting observations is you think that you could become free from rules, and all you discover is that you become a slave to your wants. So there is no free state. There's just you're kind of either subject to your own will or somebody else's will. And you would think that being subject to your own will is nirvana, but that's not actually true, because your short-term will is in conflict with your long-term best interests. So either you're going to be doing things that feel either you're going to be doing things that feel like you're a slave to your future self, or you're just being destroyed by your past self. So it's like you're in a relationship, even if you become fully liberal, in the sense that you think that you should be freed from relations with other people and live a completely individual life, you're still in relation with versions of yourself throughout time, and you still have to live in relationship, even just with yourself.
Yeah, it's something I say. I get a lot of astrology clients who are coming in the middle of their Saturn returns. So they all want to talk about like Saturn stuff, which is all about like putting on limits and hard boundaries and discipline and all the stuff that people generally don't like because it's difficult, right? But if you don't have boundaries and limits to define the form, all you get is chaos. You can never have order. It's the same way, like you're a musician, right? So you understand that there are rules to music. And if you follow these rules, you can produce music that is harmonious and beautiful and evocative. And it's only once you really understand those rules can you creatively break them and still get something that sounds good. But for most people, without those rules in place, it's just going to be pounding every note on the keyboard and creating a cacophony. And that's how these people are living their lives. They're living their lives in chaos because they fear the imposition of a limitation that would bring them into order in a more harmonious way of being. And I think a lot of them would probably prefer to live more harmoniously, but they don't have the self-discipline to do it. And they are totally enslaved by their lower natures, all of their cravings. I mean, just look at the rates of obesity. There's no better example. Like, you have so little self-control that you can't stop putting donuts in your mouth. And you think religion is the problem, right? Like,
yeah. This is bringing to mind so much. Have you ever read any of Ecclesiastes? Does that ring a bell?
Not in any recent time. You'd have to refresh my memory.
Yeah. So but as an aside for people listening, I've got a weekend retreat I'm doing in the summer, and we're doing Ecclesiastes this year, and I'm very excited because it's probably to me the most remarkable bit of literature ever written. So it's a book in the Bible, but it's so much chiming with this conversation. So there's this part where the writer says, "I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun." It feels like this is exactly the experiment and the realization that the modern world is currently going through.
Yeah.
Like, what was the 60s except the statement, "I'm going to deny myself nothing that my eyes desire and refuse my heart nothing." And what realization are we coming to now, but that we survey all that our hands have created, all that we've done and toiled to achieve, and it's all meaningless, a chasing after the wind, and nothing has been gained under the sun. I mean, that's just a tiny piece of the critical lens that I think this book sheds on us, but it's so potent.
It is. I like it. We went way off on a tangent, didn't we?
Sorry about that. Yeah, I'll tell you what. I'm going to put some more gold in the pot for you if you succeed at this battle. You ready to fight the beast?
All right, let's fight him. He doesn't look too scary.
He's already looks like he's falling off the cliff.
Yay! I was nervous there. I have to admit, when I saw those numbers pop up, I was
well done. Another worthy victory. Let's keep going. So you've got to the West Crossroads, I believe, meaning that you can go either to the Charisma Chasm or the Tautology Tower. So those are topics relating to tradition or film. Or you might want to go back and bank your 89 gold. This is a tough decision.
I was feeling confident until you said that.
I shouldn't have given you the option.
No, I would have just kept going if you hadn't said that. Now you've made me kind of nervous about my gold. I'm feeling...
Well, I feel like I need
a bit like a dragon guarding my hoard now.
Yes. I feel like I should have a heartbeat sound effect to go underneath this so that the viewers are feeling the
I know.
The stress.
It's intense. You know what? Let's go to Charisma Chasm.
Whoa. Now I need a studio audience to like cheer for you for taking the courageous decision. Well, may fortune favor the bold. Uh-oh. Once again, on the route, another fearsome beast. And this time, the Kraken.
Another serpent, man.
Looking quite similar. Yeah. You're. Do you know, I actually saw that the one that you got, I've got various options for beasts. So I clicked this random button and it gave you another serpent before this one. So I'm like, I've given you another chance to get away from the serpents, but the random dice aren't going to let you get away with it. So to face the serpent again is your fate. But we're talking about tradition here. So I think this is home turf.
At least in my wheelhouse. So if I mess this up, I'm gonna I'll have no credibility left. I'll have to just delete my account and retire.
Well, the stakes couldn't be higher. And the question is, can traditions be revived authentically? Do you have to have that consistent thread? Does a tradition have to be continually alive from its founding down to today? Or is it possible to discover a tradition from the past that has been lost and bring it back?
Man, why'd you have to give me a question I don't know the answer to? No, I'm just kidding. This kind of goes back to what I was saying before about kind of needing like a god or a prophet or something to kind of come and reveal this to you, right? Mm-hmm. So once a tradition has degraded, like traditions are, the rite is critical, like RITE, rights. Once those rights are lost, you can't really revive them because it's so foundational to the rite that it be performed exactly without any changes being made to it. Once you start making changes to it, you start getting a degradation. So if we were to go and look at a tradition from the past, no shade against like the folkish European pagans and stuff who are trying to do this. I'm not saying that it's not a worthwhile endeavor, but in terms of being able to like bring it back in its full glory, I just don't see it happening because we just don't have the knowledge. And we also don't have the caliber of people who are able to make it efficacious. So even if we had the exact formula of the rite, the person performing the rite does not have, like, unless they're just a very exceptional person, odds are that they are not going to have the spiritual virility required to effectively handle those forces, to deal with any spiritual blowback. More likely, they're just opening themselves up to being spiritually overwhelmed if they actually manage to get the rite to work in the first place, which is, that's the big question. Can you get it to work? One, and if you can get it to work, can you handle the forces that you're unleashing? And I think the answers to both of those questions is a pretty hard no when we're talking about modern people trying to do this. That isn't to say that there can't still be some level of efficacy. Excuse me. I was reading some Jocelyn Godwin a while back, and he's talking about this concept of like an egregore and directing a lot of spiritual energy and attention towards an idea, which that energy may coalesce into something that seems like a god, or could even operate benefically within our realm if we were able to kind of contact that. And so, maybe there's the ability to do something like that. How many people are believing in it really hard? And I think to some extent that may even be how like prayer works, for example, is you're just directing so much psychic energy at one thing, and so many people are doing it over a long enough period of time that it actually has a material manifestation. But that's very different than talking about like actually being able to revive a tradition when these traditions are based in very specific rites. Those rites are a recreation of the stories of the gods, and they were intended to be performed by a priest caste that had undergone extensive training to be able to evoke and handle these forces. To me, this question is kind of a partner question to people who say, can I initiate myself? Well, a prerequisite to these things would be able to be like sit in silence in meditation and have total control over your mind. So if you can't do that as a baseline, these questions then become irrelevant. You're not going to self-initiate. You're not going to be able to conduct the rite and handle those forces because you don't even have mastery over yourself. So it also kind of like segues into our last tangent we were just on.
Yeah, these questions have all been beautifully interconnected today, so I'm enjoying that.
It's been fortunate how that worked out.
Yeah. So I guess I'm thinking about that there is there's a wonderful, beautiful, praiseworthy thing that we can identify in tradition, and it's one of the most important things to preserve and to be respectful and to maintain traditions. And then a separate thing, you can identify when there is something that is new, that is current, that is appearing, that is sort of bursting into reality and into life. It's like something that is in the spring of its existence, that is hatching. And perhaps you could make a value judgment between those two and say that tradition is actually better, and you should tend towards maintaining tradition rather than jumping on the bandwagon of something that has not proven itself worthy. But in an age where there is a lack of tradition, when the torch has not been handed over successfully from previous generations, if you find yourself in that environment where you aren't part of a strong tradition, perhaps you could embrace whatever seems vital at that moment. And what is a kind of living, breathing force in one age becomes a tradition in the next age. So maybe rather than looking with jealousy to the past and trying to bring about a kind of fake, denuded version of a tradition, you should just accept the fact that you have been placed on Earth in the unfortunate environment in which traditions are weak, and try to live authentically, which means being without tradition. But it's kind of maybe humans have a mode where they can be in the founding moment of what will become a tradition, which is maybe weaker. But do you see what I'm saying? That if you've got that choice of like I once had an interesting comment from a Catholic. So I'm a Protestant and I don't come from a Catholic background. And he said the surprising thing that actually the least Catholic thing for me to do would be to drop my Protestant background, my Protestant traditions, and to move to Rome and switch traditions, because like half the point of Catholicism is the fact that you're rooted in something familial. And so weirdly, the same logic that in his mind meant that he had to stay within Rome applied to me, meant that I couldn't.
That's interesting. I've actually never heard a Catholic argue that before.
Yeah, it was very interesting. Yeah.
Huh. But
I don't think most Catholics would probably agree with that, but it did make me think. I was like, oh, yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah.
Once you've been disconnected, like as much as you might admire somebody else's culture, you can't just become part of it. I mean, this is partly the
like you'll find the odd individual who fits really neatly into, like, say, Hinduism or something. You find a Westerner who really manages to just find their place in that, but most people aren't going to. It's too culturally alien. And I think, this is one of those things that makes me think, there's not just one right religion. There are religions that are suited to people of different natures, different geographies, different cultures, and that are meant to work harmoniously with those material conditioned aspects of it to guide people towards transcendence.
It's actually related somewhat to questions about immigration, in that if people move from one country to another, they're going to feel uprooted and they're going to long for being a part of their new country. Maybe not all of them, but there's certainly people who are born in a country even as a first generation immigrant, or I guess second generation at that point, and they're going to think, why do I not 100% feel that sense of belonging? And it's just that you can want as much as you can. It doesn't matter how much you wish.
Yeah.
Your essence is imperfectly like located in time and space, and
exactly
you have to grapple with that. But you can't, whether somebody is rooted in a tradition or not is sometimes out of their control, and sort of it doesn't matter how much they try to authentically embody a tradition, it could still never really take.
Yeah, that's always kind of been my problem with, like, trying to find a specific tradition to practice, is that none of them really resonate with me enough to really grab me. There's things I like about almost all of them. I mean, any religion, I could probably find something of value in it, but I don't want the whole ball of wax. And it's kind of like you're saying about, like, being an immigrant. Well, I've been a serial immigrant, but at heart, I still feel like an American, and I think I always will. I'll always identify with that first and foremost. And it doesn't matter how many other places I've lived. All those places still hold a special place in my heart. I feel more connected and sympathetic to the places I've lived versus places I haven't, but they don't feel like home to me. And
but it's a very different thing, picking and choosing, isn't it?
It is.
You do not feel connected to a tradition that you have put together, like you've been at a buffet cart and said, I'll have, I'll have monotheism with a side helping of Vishnu, and I'll have, it doesn't really work. You either say, I just position myself within this existing tradition and I accept it entirely, and if you are able to be in that position, that's a great blessing, I would think. Well, I think I am in that sense quite rooted, because I have essentially the same beliefs as my parents, so maybe I'm unusual in that sense. And I do find that it's, I feel lucky in that sense. And I suppose the other thing that people can do is to decide to jump in with 2 feet into a new tradition, but a living one. So other people are following this tradition, and I'm going to 100% commit to it. But it feels like in the modern age, where we're so used to being able to go and buy things, we have that kind of consumer attitude towards tradition as well. If it doesn't suit me, then I won't have it. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's more like, it's not that the traditions they just don't feel right. It's that there are like specific doctrinal things that I just know are not true, and I can't reconcile that. And so I don't want to attach myself to a tradition where I might have to reject certain fundamental premises of what they believe, because it just doesn't align with what I actually believe and what I feel to be true. So I've kind of just reconciled myself to the fact that I'm just a seeker of truth. I'll take it from wherever I can find it. I'll try to integrate it into some meaningful synthesis within myself. And, maybe later in life, something will come along. Maybe I develop in a certain way that propels me towards a specific path, or maybe I just stay like this forever. It doesn't really bother me. I think it bothers other people a lot more than it bothers me.
Really? Yeah. I like that. The seeker of truth as the most core, the one central axiom. No matter how uncomfortable it is, or no matter how much trouble it causes you, you're always directed towards truth. At least you have a core kind of conceptual. You have a compass, I guess. Maybe that's the way to put it.
Yes, and I think also just personality-wise, like I've always been very comfortable being an outsider. I don't feel any strong need to belong to anything or to be accepted by others. I don't feel like I need. I mean, it would be nice to have a spiritual community around me, but it's not a must-have. It's a bonus. So, I
find
think
that personality a lot in our kind of online circles, and it makes us quite a fractured community, because as soon as any of us feel like we've accidentally ended up with other people who agree with us, we're immediately making real sure that it's authentic by challenging
spiraling.
it. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Yeah. I guess there's a difference between being happy to be an outsider and seeking to be an outsider.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't ever seek it. It's, it's a lonely position to be in. Oftentimes it can be a very challenging position to be in, but, and I think I've encountered a lot of people who are truth seeking and looking for a tradition to attach themselves to. And it really bothers them that they don't have a community and a place to belong. And, they're not the right personality to thrive on their own. We all need different things. We're all different people. So I just count myself lucky that if I'm not going to choose a tradition, at least I'm happy with my decision.
Yeah, I just think about my own personality and wonder if I can be a bit more on the side of wanting to disagree, to be contentious, to be the outsider. So when I was a teenager and it was very uncool to be religious, that was perhaps actually helpful to my faith, because I kind of wanted to be different, I wanted to grumpily disagree with everyone.
I was kind of like that as a teenager too. I was probably at my most pious as a teenager.
But for the same reason, because it was uncool to be
yeah, it's just like
religion.
Well, none of these people are ever going to think I'm cool anyway, so I'm just going to I kind of take joy in being deliberately provocative. It's a terrible character flaw. I know it's not spiritual at all, but I do.
But this is exactly what I think.
I do take a sick pleasure in riling people up.
Yeah, but that's what I think marks so many of us out who've ended up in this slightly scandalous area of kind of right-wing thought, where we've steered into things that have been verboten. And
that's how I ended up in the right wing, was looking for truth. And the only people telling the truth at that time about the taboo subjects were like the white nationalists. For, all their other flaws, they were the only ones talking about the truth about the races and all this other stuff that, just, you can't talk about that.
Yeah.
And
and maybe
if I can't talk about it, then I want to know about it.
Yeah. Well, maybe more strongly than just these are the people who are telling the truth, but that everyone else is so obviously
Right.
telling lies.
Everyone else is either deliberately lying or they're trying to prevent me from having this knowledge. And I'm like, well, even if I don't agree with it, I still want to go find out about it and decide for myself. I don't want
Yeah.
somebody else to tell me. I hate other people doing my thinking for me. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean I necessarily always come to the right conclusions, but that's my mistake to make.
But there are undoubtedly truths that have been have only been sayable in these kind of socially unacceptable quarters. And I mean, many of them weirdly have ended up becoming popular truths. A decade later, it's like, suddenly everyone is admitting this thing that 10 years ago was absolutely unacceptable. But there are still things that are third rail topics. And I think for people with a certain personality type, they end up getting driven into these communities where there are a mixture of people there who are truth seekers and people who are
ideologues.
Yeah, well, and also just people who want. So one of the motivations for wanting to challenge the received wisdom is because you're truth seeking. But one of the reasons for wanting to challenge truth, received truths, is because you're antinomian and you just want things to be destroyed. So
yeah, there's a lot of people like that in the right, unfortunately, too many.
Yeah, and, so you kind of you find yourself in a community where you go, I'm allies with a lot of people who actually want to tear down and destroy. But my other choice is to be part of a community of people who are going to lie and ask me to lie and violate my moral beliefs in that way. And those people are also, those people are powerful, and their point of view is being perfectly well articulated. So
yeah, exactly.
I don't feel I have anything. I don't have anything to learn from spending more time with the people who have the megaphone. I already have their perspective.
Exactly.
I'm drummed into me.
Way more interested in people who have unusual ideas, weird perspectives. Like, I don't even care if it's right or wrong. I just want to hear this different idea. I'm so sick of hearing the same talking points over and over. But this is kind of one of the things where it's been like the truth seeking got me into the far right, but it's also the thing that's kind of led me away from it as well, because I kind of come to realize that a lot of the people who are in it are not in it for the same reasons that I am. They are ideologues, and they don't care what's true. They just want their narrative and they want to protect it at all costs. I'm like, I can't go there with you. Like, I'm happy to be an ally with you on these issues where it's based in truth, but I'm not going to lie to promote this. That goes against my own sense of integrity. And, that makes me a lot of enemies of people that, I don't have any problem with them personally, but ideologues tend to be incredibly dogmatic and rigid. And I'm, it doesn't bother me to go my own way at that point. I score like 9th percentile agreeableness. So
really,
you're probably not going to find too many people who are more disagreeable than I am.
That's funny. That's interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I've never tried to score how agreeable I am, and I guess I in those kind of quizzes, there's kind of Myers-Briggs stuff where you have to self-assess, and they're asking you questions about whether you like conflict, whether you like disagreement or not. On the one hand, I love debate. There's nothing I enjoy more than listening to people having a fully fledged disagreement. And when somebody is beginning to argue against me, then I get really excited. I'm really enlivened by that. On the other hand, I'm a massive interpersonally, I tend to smooth over conflict. And if I see two other people arguing with each other, I will try to get in the middle and find common ground between them.
Interesting. I do the same thing usually. But I can be very competitive. Like, I don't like to get into a conflict, but once I'm in it, it's kind of a rush. And then afterwards, I'm like, I just don't like who I am when I do that. It's kind of like this game here that we're doing. I'm just like, I want to crush Semi-Agog. And then I'm like, that's so bad. Don't be like that, cat. That's not.
In a way, those are two bits of your personality that I think are best when they are strong and you can switch them on and off, rather than both being weak. So there's people who are conflict averse because they're afraid of conflict, but they also so they hate when people are fighting and they can't deal with it and they can't dampen it. But they also, if somebody challenged them, then they would be afraid of that fight. And I think both of those are worse attitudes than being like, I kind of want to fight, and if it came to it, I'm ready to go. But in this moment, I will choose peace.
Yeah, like I'm not going to do it unless I feel like I'm kind of forced into it. But in the Path of Cinnabar, Julius Evola talks about how he has like these two competing principles within himself. One is like the drive for transcendence, and the other is this like very like warrior caste nature, and how they're all often at odds. I'm like, I feel you, man.
Yeah. So if he was in this conversation, he'd be agreeing. He'd be like, yeah, same. Good. Okay, let's do let's
another
do
long
our final
tangent.
battle. Indeed. But that's, secretly this whole format is about the interesting conversation and not about the points. The
everything's made up and the points don't matter. Like, on whose line is it anyway?
Whose line is it? Well, I was thinking about, because I guess I came up with this format in a fairly intuitive way. It wasn't very calculated and planned, but I wonder if partly what I've done, because there's the kind of macho masculine element of you're a knight and you've got a sword and you're battling monsters, that gives it a kind of I think it appeals to me for it to have that masculine energy, but also I don't take it too seriously. But it gives these kind of questions that could be quite academic and thinky a bit more life. I wouldn't want it to come across as pretentious. So we have this slightly kind of meta mocking structure around the conversation. I don't know. Yeah, I
like it. I love board games.
Good. Well, the thing that people will, because I'm recording all of these before I broadcast them, and I'm sort of second guessing what the reaction is going to be, and I predict that there's going to be a subset of people who are really annoyed that it isn't a rigid, clearly winnable, gameable, mathematical kind of board game, because they want to analyze it.
Spurgs. You don't have to worry. I like it, and that's all that matters.
That's a lot of my audience.
Clearly the most important person in the universe.
All right. Well, speaking of, let's do. I suspect this might end.
Kill it.
This might end up being our last battle. So this is make or break. This could be. You could lose all 89 of the gold in your pouch, or you could be walking out of here victorious.
He's not very strong. I think I won.
Victory! Hooray!
Yes, to snakes.
All right.
I'll go bank that gold now.
2 snakes. Yeah, I think it's a wise move. So back to Lambda's Landing. And let's hit bank all gold, which puts you at 313. Wow, which puts you 2 ahead of the current leader, Black Horse. So you are 313. You're top of the leaderboard just. So congratulations. And thank you for appearing on the program. As always, just a really fascinating guest to have and to talk to, and I I always feel I'm pushed in the most interesting directions. So thank you for joining me.
Well, I'll have to come back and play it again because I see there's a lot of places I didn't visit. And whenever I play map-based games, I have to play it until I've visited all the places.
Yeah, the completionist.
You might really enjoy a game called Sleeping Gods, which is very map-based.
Ooh.
And very... you have to go and explore and try to find like these idols to see if you can resurrect the gods to get back to your universe. Cool. But along the way, you're meeting all these people who are like, no, we put them to sleep for a reason. What are you doing?
That does sound cool. I had quite a few ideas for features I never quite got working in this version. I was going to have items that let you interact with future and past guests. The system is almost there, but it was just a little bit too rickety, so I decided to leave it. And the other one was that you could maybe pick questions that were harder and get extra stat boosts for that. But it would be cool as well when you look around the map to see little icons of things to try to go to and go and collect, because there's this kind of little bit of your brain, isn't there, that sees a shiny thing off in the distance and wants to go over and explore it, collect it, bring it back.
Yes. Well, I'm sure you'll continue to develop the game year after year, so I look forward to playing the new and updated version each time.
Good. Well, yes, go and train for the next 365 days and come back.
I'm going to have to work on my sword fighting skills for all these monsters here.
It might be a full VR experience by next year, where I ship out headsets to everyone.